to the Behr Necessities Podcast, Episode 1, here with my good buddy Mike Josephson. Thanks for taking the time to sit down, and welcome to episode number 1.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to do it.
Yeah. So I think part of the reason why we're putting this together really is real estate is the hot button topic today, and there seems to be endless questions, and people need information. So I think that's part of the impetus of us putting this together. So hopefully we'll keep it short, we'll have some fun, and kind of go from there. But why don't we just kind of jump right into it? I know we talked about what everybody's number one question is, what's going on in the market? Sure.
No, it's something that we hear all the time. I know I hear it all the time when I'm out with friends, out with family. So I think it'd just be good to go through some of those. So, yeah, I'm not going to give it to you too broadly, but what's going on with the market?
It's a loaded question, right? And it depends on where you are, right? Now, I don't know who's watching this, but, for Philadelphia, you could, because of how everything is a market to market and oftentimes street to street thing. So it's funny when people ask that, it's like, all right, well, when you say how the market is, are we talking Philadelphia? Are we talking Montgomery County? Like, what are we talking about?
Oh, that's fair. Well, we both live in Montgomery County personally. Obviously, we do a lot of business in Philadelphia. Let's start with Montgomery County. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
So you had showed we were looking at some of the statistics the other day about market, the inventory. The inventory accumulation, which, if you don't know what the inventory accumulation is, essentially that is based off the rate of current sales, how many months would it take to sell out the inventory if not another home came to the market? And I don't remember the number you were just looking at the other day.
So I was actually looking at a 10-year running average of the number. So just to give you an example, say 10 years ago, the number was 7 months. Mm-hmm. So that means is if no one lists their home for sale and everybody that's looking to buy a home, after 7 months, there'll be no more homes left to purchase. That number has steadily decreased, as I'm sure you probably imagine from what you're hearing about the market, all the way to this year being half a month, so about 2 weeks.
And that's a dramatic change, right? And I think the differential between last year and this year is it like a 40% difference?
Yeah, I think it was just about 1.5 all the way down to half.
1.5 to half. So we're
talking
talking about
math, but I'm not 6 weeks to about 2.
Certainly not a math wizard, but I'm thinking that's like a 60%, 65% reduction in inventory. And well, here's the thing that people, because people are always asking about inventory. What are some of like the things that you see as a problem? Like a lot of times we'll look at as inventory, lack of inventory, the supply and demand thing. I mean, if you're familiar with the law of supply and demand, when inventory goes up and demand goes down, what happens to prices?
The price goes down.
Price goes down, and it's the exact opposite if inventory drops and demand goes up.
Sure.
But I think there's a problem that I see in the lack of inventory, because it gets to that point where it's like, and I don't want to go too technical, but the law of supply and demand.
Sure. Well, what's the problem?
Or I say law of supply and demand. I already hit on that. Sorry. No. What I meant is the law of diminishing returns. So the lack of inventory is actually, I think, beneficial up to a certain point, right? And then at a certain point, it actually becomes more of a negative than a positive in terms of what's going on in the market.
Okay. So what you're saying is eventually you hit a point where the demand is so high, inventory is so low that it's almost suppressing more sales from happening.
Yeah. I mean, I talk to people every day where it's, Zach, I would sell my home, but I can't find something.
And that's a super valid concern. I mean, you don't want to sell and end up homeless or having to rent in a condo or, you got a family with a bunch of kids or, it's a real issue.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue because it's like, it's a perpetual issue. And I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and they're like, because she had called to interview me had some questions about the market. I guess it's for a real estate law class that they're taking. And one of the things was about what's going on in the market. And I think it's a perpetual issue that until there's more inventory, it will actually, I think, reduce the number of sales although people want to move, right? I don't think it's like the other way around where people aren't wanting to buy or people aren't wanting to transition, but I think there's a certain level of fear.
Right.
Right? And so fear oftentimes is that, I think, rational, right? Like, I don't want to be homeless.
Well, and I don't mean this to be an advertisement for us. I think this is more us and the market in general. What are you doing? What are we doing to get past that? Help people that are in that situation where they really have to move and they're just completely frightened to do so. Like what steps can you do? What steps can we as realtors do?
So I'm a firm believer in this philosophy of the obstacle is the way, right?
Sure.
And it was a great book by Ryan Holiday, and it literally talks about...
Fantastic book.
Yeah, and it talks about most people see an obstacle and that's all they focus on, right? Without saying, okay, well, is there an opportunity here? And I think there is an absolute opportunity in the marketplace in this situation, right? So let's give you an example, right? So if you're selling a house,
okay,
right, what's the benefit of selling right now?
Well, the market's great, prices are up.
Market's great, prices are up. You are commanding the negotiation.
Right.
99 times out of 100, right? Now, there's always going to be special circumstances where people, they're whether it's a condo. Now, like, again, every market is different. This is why when we kind of started the podcast is every market's different, right? So, like, if you have a condo building in the city of Philadelphia, you may not be in this position, but what we generally refer to the market as are single-family residential resales. But the benefit of selling one to somebody today is because of the lack of inventory, price isn't the only negotiable item.
Right. So, there's a few things. Sure, there's inspections, there's if you need to do repairs, not do repairs.
Yeah.
You can dictate when you're going to close. You say you're in a position of power right now as a seller. There's a lot of demand for your home, not a lot of homes to compete with.
Well, and look, when we talk about the benefit of the multiple things that you can negotiate, you hit on them, closing date, price. Those are all factors, right? But what excites you most? We represent a lot of sellers. It's probably, our business split is maybe about 65% sellers sold versus about 35% buyer split. What excites you most about sellers having leverage in that in the negotiation because of that?
What excites me most? I guess the key is you can have people compete for your home. So I think it's always nice to have something that other people want.
Yeah, that's for sure.
to narrow it down.
But you think about the process, right? And try to stay with me with my thought process here. We can negotiate on price. We can negotiate a bigger deposit. We can negotiate if the buyer is getting a mortgage covering any appraisal shortages. We can negotiate lack of inspections.
Right.
So what's the most exciting thing? Or I guess what should be the most exciting? And maybe it's not. Everybody's going to be different. But I think probably what most excites me is what I was getting at is waiving of inspections for sellers.
Sure. Yeah. It's where most deals fall apart are at inspections. In general. Not that we have a ton that fall apart, but nationwide, industry-wide.
I think if you look at the nation, right, or even local. I don't know what. I'm going to throw a statistic out there, and I don't have it, and we probably should have been better prepared for that. But I'm willing to bet that 80+% of deals that fall out because of home inspection.
I wouldn't argue with that number. It tracks with what we've seen. Right.
So if you're selling a house, right, and you're in this multiple offer situation, right, and you can waive that, that's a benefit because obviously what we try to do is bulletproof a transaction. So this is the benefit of selling a house. But here's another thing, we've done this, I don't know how many times. How about negotiating a longer closing?
Sure.
Right? Or the seller can stay and rent back until they find something. Or I think that may be it, right? Did I miss anything on that?
No, those are the keys. I guess that kind of takes it back to where we started. What are we doing to help those people who are scared they can't find something? Well, you you got to flip it around. You're using your leverage that you have, being in that position of having a home that people want.
Exactly.
And then using that to get what you need. So, yeah, I think that's great.
Which is a double benefit, right? And this is what I've tried to express to people over the last couple of years with the lack of inventory is the lack of inventory is when you're selling a house. Listen, I think that the fear people would have about being homeless is valid, right? But you can be protected, right? Because of the multiple offer situation, we can build in either a longer closing or a contingent upon you finding a new home.
Right. So you're never forced to leave your home.
You're never forced.
Yeah.
But it also has a dual benefit.
Go on.
Okay. So today, because of the lack of inventory, if you're buying a house and you need to sell your place, it's very difficult because I shouldn't say nobody, but if 1 out of 10 is willing to take a contingency for the sale of your home, right?
Right. So you're saying what are you saying? It's very tough to get your offer accepted if your offer is based on your home needing to sell.
Exactly. So the problem is, and this is where we're still down that track of people are concerned about being homeless. There still is a benefit too because of the buying process, right? If you're competing against 10, 15, 20 other offers, you've got to do whatever it takes to make the offer as strong as possible. But you can do that on the front end by selling your place and make it contingent upon you finding something. So it's kind of like I don't know if you'd call it like the chicken and the egg thing, but it's almost like it's a dual approach, right? You've got to know both simultaneously.
Right. I guess you're in a stronger position to buy when you can say, hey, I'm already under a contract with a buyer who has no contingencies, there's no concerns, are willing to cover over the appraisal.
Yeah, and obviously you can go bit by bit on that negotiation, but again, they kind of come in full circle to the opportunity there, right? Mm-hmm. So the opportunity is you can get the best possible price you probably have ever seen.
Sure.
Right? You get to negotiate all the best terms, including your biggest fear of being homeless. You can squash that while also simultaneously, you could even close into a rent back, which means there's no contingencies. Now, it's not the preferred thing, but again, if you're making an offer and you don't have to make it contingent upon closing.
Right, and that's there you already have all your cash that you've made from your sale in your bank account ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
Why do you think there's no inventory?
That's a great question. I mean, so we're coming off a period with absolute historic lows, the lowest interest rates in certainly our lifetime. Mm-hmm. I think it goes even beyond that.
Yeah.
So buyers had more ability to purchase than they've ever had before.
So the affordability's there.
Affordability, I think, COVID probably had something to do with that. I think a lot of people wanted to, and coming down to markets again, but a lot of people wanted to get out of the super densely populated areas, out of condo buildings, to a place where they have a bit more space. And, more often than not, that's the suburbs to single family homes or, twins, things of that nature. So.
Yeah, it's interesting too because if you actually look at the data from right before COVID, the end of 19 into 20, we were actually on a downward trending market. It was headed to a more it doesn't, unless it's in the case of 08 where it was a huge seller's market, but even then it was a transition. It was transitioning from a seller's market to a more neutral market, which is more of a normal market. It has that, obviously, seller market, neutral market, buyer market, but it was going to that, right?
Yeah, it certainly felt that way.
And then COVID hits. And then, of course, with everything you hear about COVID, how many people did we talk to that said, I'm not letting anybody in my house?
Right, it's going to wait till after or wait.
Yeah. Look, I don't want any people coming through. I don't have to. So really, I think what it did is actually, during COVID, eliminated the non-motivated seller.
Yeah, I think it kind of hit from both sides. Like I said, people want to get out, people are looking to buy. And on the flip side, you have more sellers who weren't comfortable with it, rightfully so, that weren't comfortable with showing their home or leaving their home or allowing people to come through. So it kind of hit from both ends.
How many people do you think and it just came to me, how many people do you think moved their plans up? And I had this conversation with a few people over the last couple of years. Is like, how many people in 2020 had the plan of like, all right, well, we're going to have kids or we're going to start our family or whatever in 2 to 5 years. And then COVID hit and they said, well, change plans. You know,
Sam moved it up.
How many moved up? And I wonder what the net impact of that will be in the next couple of years with the people that would have traditionally waited to 2022, 23, 24 to move, but instead move that up to 2020 and 2021.
Yeah, you know what? I haven't thought about it prior to you asking, but we do, we have some similar friends. We have some other friends who, don't necessarily know each other, but we've had quite a few friends that have all had babies in the last 2 years, yourself included. So
yeah, COVID babies. And I think it's interesting. I'd be curious to see what that will do in terms of the overall sale. But it may just get us back to that point in the next couple of years where it goes back to that, resets it to the neutral market.
Right. And not that I think it's necessarily a bad thing either. It's it's tough to buy. There's no question about it. Now we are prepared for that. We have ways to help people, but I understand people being hesitant and being nervous about it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. So we could obviously keep on this topic, and we'll probably keep coming back to the market because that seems to be a continued thing. And look, the market, in fact, I had this conversation with my good buddy, Brian Ogletree in Ohio. And he said, the market is just faster today. Everything is faster, right?
Sure.
And so his thought was that the market will shift faster because everything's happening faster. I mean, think about everything in life, right? I mean, instant gratification, your cell phones. I mean, everything is so much faster. Like, in an old market, it used to go from like a couple months into an 18-month process to have a market change.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if, what do you think? Do you think because of technology and everything that's happened, because it's not that there's more sales or less inventory overall. It's just that they're happening faster.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how it couldn't have that effect because everything else moves quicker than it used to.
Significantly.
Right.
And we'll go into probably on the next couple, reasons. We'll probably talk about, I think, on one of our next podcasts or whatever. We'll talk about, why is there, we've already kind of hit on it a little bit, but why is the inventory shortage so much?
Sure.
But I think part of that has to do with, building costs and everything. And we'll dive into that probably on another call. But
you touched on something that I think might be worthwhile, and as in terms of how it'll affect the market, whether that effect happens immediately over the next few weeks, months, years. The Fed raised the interest rate today for the first time in 3 years.
Yes.
I don't know the answer, but how do you think that's going to affect the market?
Well, for buyers, it'll make it a little bit more challenging to buy, right? It changes affordability. So and I don't know if it's an exact number, but I think it's something like for every 1% change in interest rate, you lose about 10% buying power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard the same.
So if you're qualified to buy at $300 for a certain price, $270 is kind of that new level, which it will make it harder to buy for some people.
Right.
And I almost wonder if the volatility too will make cash offers look a little bit more attractive.
Mm-hmm. What about this? What about back to supply and demand, because I think that's very important in real estate, obviously.
Yeah.
If the demand from buyers is suddenly lower, will that help increase the supply and kind of move the market more towards a neutral?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a valid proposition, right? I mean, I do think that if there's less, then people probably feel more confident, but I wonder how much of a lagged measure that would take. How long would it take?
I'm curious of that as well.
Yeah. But to another point, right, going back to interest rates, if interest rates go up, what goes down? And
inflation. Well,
inflation, but what else?
The overall cost of the home, typically?
Potentially, but see, the cost of the home is going to be directly, it's going to be demand, it's going to be probably a number of factors, which interest rates really will have an impact to it. So I think there's some validity there. What I'm thinking is less refis.
Sure, okay.
How many people do we know over the last 2 years have done refis?
Almost every person in our immediate friends, family,
Yeah.
a lot of our clients, almost everybody.
So, and actually, it's funny that, like, now that we're talking about this, so, all right, so interest rates go up, you're going to have less refinances, which means people now may actually look to sell and buy, versus where some people would say, look, I'm just going to refi and stay in the house. I can convert my 30-year mortgage into a 15-year mortgage
Right.
for virtually the same payment, maybe slightly higher, but cut off years and years off the mortgage.
Sure.
That goes up, the refis go down. Does that bring more buyers to the market? And potentially more sellers.
Right.
Because it's going to be the dual approach again. Which is interesting.
It is, yeah. I'm certainly excited to see where it comes to and where it goes with it. But
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's going to take. I think is interesting and obviously something we'll be keeping an eye on. But
Yeah, well, usually we say in real estate, but everything's always changing, right? We usually always say the impact is 90 to 180 days. But, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. But I do think that with those going up, less refis, maybe there's more inventory. So it could have a multiple effect. But here's the other thing. What the low interest rates actually wound up doing as well, and I wonder how many, and I don't have the data here, but how many people also refied their house and instead of selling it and buying something else, kept it and rent it because it brought the mortgage payment down to the point where it made sense to hold on to the house.
yeah, I mean, not having the data, but certainly something that anyone who's an investor has considered or has done in the past. So
Yeah.
with interest rates low, it makes it that much easier to do that.
Okay. So we're talking about interest rates, and I want to ask you a question. So we've been talking about interest rates, affordability, those things. So interest rates going down. Okay, I'm just going to ask you the question: renting versus buying today.
Oh, I mean, without a doubt, in 95% of the cases, it makes way more sense to buy. Essentially, because you're just building equity right off the bat. If someone had bought a home 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
home prices are up almost 15% in the Philadelphia metro. That's all the surrounding counties. So rather than pay rent for 2 years, you've now already earned 15% on your home, and that's money. That's yours. You're not paying someone else to pay off their mortgage.
I mean, 15% on a $300,000 property.
It's 30,000. Sorry,
45,000.
45,000.
So
Yeah.
by buying versus renting, right? Because here's the problem that I hear a lot of times, and you probably hear this all the time. If you're listening to this, you may have probably even had this thought process, but it's like, I'm going to save more money for a bigger down payment.
Right.
What's the problem with that
Well,
the last 18 months?
Right. The home prices have gone up, and you're saving money, but the value of the home has increased so much that you would have made more money had you made the move sooner, even paying more on your mortgage than
it's
saving.
And you're getting into that mortgage cycle faster, right? It's one of the other things that a lot of people don't think about is like, the sooner you get into the mortgage, the faster you're paying it down, right? Because the principal buys down more per month. But you give an example, right? Let's just say we have a friend who's been wanting to buy a house for a number of years, but they didn't want to pay PMI, right?
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to save more money so they didn't have to pay PMI.
Right.
So they saved $25,000 in the last 18 months. In the example you just shared, they just lost $20,000.
No, that's exactly right.
Not to mention, because here's the other factor, the interest rates.
Right. Now the interest rate's gone up, so
you just got double whacked, right?
sure.
Like you got hit from both angles on this, where you lost $20,000 in the savings to the loss of appreciation that you missed out on. So now your payment's gone up in accordance too with the interest rates.
I mean, through history, if you go back and look, the strongest indicator, the strongest unit of wealth is owning a home. So I think it's...
Yeah, honestly, and most people, like anything you read, research, most people have made their wealth in holding real estate.
Right.
So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting topic. So, if you're thinking about renting or buying, renting versus buying, it's something you should probably look a little bit deeper into. It's like, interest rates are going up, but because with the lower interest rates too, it made things more affordable for renters to buy, but now it's kind of adjusting. So you want to look at these numbers and I mean, don't go by what Betty Lou Bick down the street says, or your buddy or your cousin. Like you want to like really look at these and say, how does all of this impact you?
Right, and talk to a mortgage person, talk to a realtor, talk to someone who can get you some realistic numbers. Not someone that's just trying to force you into buying, but if you're paying $2,200 or something like that a month in rent for a 2 or 3 bedroom, odds are really high that you can buy a house and have far less of a monthly expenditure.
Yeah.
It's
without a doubt. Well, most rentals are going to look for what? First, last, and security anyway.
Right, so you need a ton of money up front.
Yep.
And here's the thing, too. That person wouldn't rent it to you if you weren't paying more than the mortgage. It's a terrible investment.
It's a good point.
Look at it that way. So
let's kind of dive in. So we're talking about rentals. And I think this will be our last topic for our first podcast, but I think this has been a lot of fun. So one of the biggest issues we've seen again, we're in Philadelphia marketplace in the suburbs. So this is, if you're not watching, if you're watching, you're not local, I apologize, but maybe it's important for your market too. Biggest issues we've seen, because we've represented a lot of landlords and people wanting to sell multi-families, apartment buildings, or just single-family residentials that are currently rented out. Biggest problems that you're seeing. Because you see, so Mike runs, just to give people some perspective, he runs the front end of our business, right? Him and Amy, I don't want to call them, I don't know if we have a job title for you or not, but essentially they run the front end, which means before we put a home on the market, we're doing all of our due diligence to make sure, is this house and property fit for sale? So your biggest issues, or the biggest issues you see in the Philadelphia marketplace for rentals right now?
Yeah, there's a few. So first one right off the bat, rental license is the biggest one. So a lot of people will just buy the home, rent it out, don't think anything of it. If you are not registered, especially in Philadelphia, although the other counties do require it as well, there's just so many problems that can arise from that. We just had a client, they had their home under contract to sell, and this ended up dragging on for months. It turns out that they did not have a rental license. The tenants decided that they were going to stop paying rent. The owner could not get them evicted because he did not have a rental license. So he wasn't able to rent the home. He couldn't get the tenants out because they currently reside in the property. So not only did it torpedo his sale, I think he's going on 8 or 9 months straight now of just not getting any rent either. So he still owes the mortgage. They're asking for their money every month. But
so the biggest complaint I've got about the city of Philadelphia, and when I say me, I mean like literally everybody I talk to is, and I do think they should be protected, but Philadelphia is so landlord opposed, right?
Yes.
They don't care about the landlords, right? Now, to a certain extent, there needs to be protection for tenants. I don't disagree with this at all, but they're very, very, very in favor and tenant friendly, I guess would be the terminology for it.
And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. What that means as a landlord, you need to have all your ducks in a row. You need to have all your paperwork. You need to have every license that City of Philadelphia calls for. You need to have leases, signed, clear, legible leases for everyone residing in the home. You just have to follow the rules to a T. And, that can be a challenge at times because it's not always easy to find that information. But
yeah, and he couldn't even collect back rent either.
Right.
So we're talking about, and we're not talking about a small 3-bedroom, we're talking about a massive house that had pretty good rent, or should have had pretty good rent that he wasn't able to collect. And solely because, now, everybody's circumstance is different, but if you ever think about renting a house, like you've got to do your due diligence. I mean, it could cost you thousands of dollars.
Oh, yeah. Thousands, tens of thousands, even.
What's the most costly expense to as a landlord? If you have rental property. Most expensive thing for you.
Oh, just having it sit empty. I know there's a word for it that's...
Vacancy.
Vacancy.
Yeah, vacancy is the most expensive thing. And so, I mean, I guess people not paying is another thing too, but I guess it kind of go hand in hand. But you think about this combination of vacancy and, look, in our area, depending on what area you're in, they're going to be always very friendly to the tenants.
Sure.
So a little bit of preparation saves people a ton of money.
No, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. So I don't know if I have anything else. You want to say anything else about landlords, these rental properties? Anything else that you're seeing that?
Yeah, I mean the main things are, twofold. Like I said, get all your ducks in a row, have your paperwork clear, have everything, do everything you're supposed to in regards to the city or whatever county you're in. The other thing is too, you got to play nice with your tenants. So I think it's super important that there's different ways to go about it, and we obviously go through different ways, based on the situation with the landlords that we're helping. But you need to have a good relationship with them, or at the very least, find a good way to work with them.
Agreed. And I think this, but here's the other thing I think that bothers me sometimes about landlords, and this is where I do think the protection is needed, is some of the, like, I don't know the word I was going to use, but some of
I think you could say slumlord.
It's slumlord, whatever. The people, like, I'm losing track because it's terrible, but some of the conditions that we've seen people live in, that landlords are not doing anything about because they couldn't be bothered. So I think there's part of, like, look, to those who are given a lot is supposed to be expected of you, right? So you owe, as a landlord, a certain sense of obligation to the people that are in your rental.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think but I think this is everywhere. I mean, there's always going to be a lot of bad landlords.
Right. And I mean, it goes back to what we said too. If you have the ability to purchase instead of rent, be in control for yourself.
Right. Well, that's the other thing. Right. And then people will complain about their landlords. And it's like, well, look, one of the things that we always preach, especially within our company, is control the controllables. Right?
Sure.
Right? Don't complain about you can't control what somebody else does.
Right.
So one of the ways that you can do that, this is why, if you don't like being told what to do, being part of, say, like a homeowners association or a condo building is probably not for you, because they dictate all sorts of rules, and you can complain about it, or you can say, that's just not the right fit for me. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to have to be told I can't do this with my house. Right. But it could just go back to control, what we would say is control the controllables.
Sure.
So, but I think we've had a pretty good session here today. This was fun.
Yeah, it's good time.
And I think we'll have more to share with you guys moving forward. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for listening to the Behr Necessities Real Estate Podcast. Again, Mike Josephson, Zach Behr. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.